Chapter 1. The Illusion of a Perfect Marriage. My name is Robert Miller. I'm 64 years old, born and raised in Ohio. For most of my life, I thought I understood what it meant to be a husband, a father, a man who kept his word. I grew up in a working-class family. My father was a factory worker, my mother a school teacher. They taught me the values of honesty, hard work, and loyalty. My father used to say, "Son, when you find a good woman, you hold on to her. You build a life, a family, and you never let her down." Those words stuck with me, maybe too much. I met Linda when we were both 21. She was beautiful in a quiet, natural way. Not the kind of beauty that turned heads on the street, but the kind that stayed with you once you saw her smile. She had brown hair that fell just past her shoulders, green eyes that could be playful or serious depending on her mood, and a laugh that made people turn their heads in a crowded room. We met at a 4th of July picnic through a mutual friend. I remember she was wearing a simple red dress, nothing fancy. But when she sat beside me on the grass and asked if I wanted some iced tea, I felt like the world shifted just a little. I was smitten. We dated for 2 years, got married in a small church with our families gathered, and moved into a modest house on the outskirts of town. I still remember carrying her over the threshold, both of us laughing like children. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt steady. We had 2 children, Michael and Sarah. We raised them the best we could, through sleepless nights, school plays, scraped knees, and teenage rebellions. We didn't have much money, but we had enough. I worked as an accountant for a small firm, and Linda stayed home when the kids were young, later working part-time at the library. We built traditions. Every Saturday morning she made waffles. Every Christmas she insisted on cutting down a real tree, even when I suggested buying a fake one to save money. Every summer, we took the kids camping near Lake Erie. We laughed around campfires, swatted mosquitoes, and told ghost stories under the stars. There were arguments, of course. Every marriage has them. We fought about bills, about discipline for the kids, about whether we could afford a new car. Sometimes we went to bed angry, though I tried not to. I believed in what my father said, that patience and forgiveness were the glue that held a marriage together. For decades, I believed we were strong, unshakable. People would ask us the secret to staying married so long, and I would smile and say, commitment. You don't run when it gets hard, looking back. Maybe I was too naive, too trusting. But at the time, I thought Linda and I were a team. The years passed. Our kids grew up and moved out. Michael became a teacher in Chicago, Sarah a nurse in Cleveland. The house got quieter, emptier. Linda and I settled into a comfortable routine. We watched the evening news together, went on long walks in the park, shared coffee on the porch in the mornings. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking at her across the table and thinking, we made it. We really made it. Through all the storms, we were still standing. There were little quirks about her I loved. She hummed while she cooked, sometimes off-key. She collected old postcards from flea markets, storing them in shoeboxes under the bed. She had this habit of chewing her lip when she was nervous, something she never outgrew from her youth. We weren't perfect, but we were us. That was enough. Or so I thought. It's strange the way memory works. Now, when I look back, I see signs that I ignored, little shadows in the sunshine. There were phone calls she'd take in the kitchen, her voice lower than usual. Times she'd say she was meeting a friend for coffee. But when I asked which friend, she'd hesitate just a second too long. Once, I found a receipt for a dinner at a restaurant we'd never been to. She brushed it off, said she went out with a friend from the library. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Trust. That was always the foundation. She was my wife, my partner. I had no reason to doubt her. But sometimes, late at night, I'd notice her staring off into space, lost in thought. I'd ask what was on her mind, and she'd smile faintly and say, "Oh, nothing." Then she'd roll over, and I'd hear her breathing steady as if she were asleep. I told myself it was just age, just stress, just the normal distance that creeps into long marriages. We had been together nearly 40 years after all. People change. Maybe I thought she just needed her own private space. What I didn't know, what I couldn't imagine, was how deep that space really went. At church, people would look at us as an example of stability. Friends would say, "You and Linda are the perfect couple. We wish we had what you two have." I'd laugh and shrug it off, but inside I felt proud. I thought we had built something real, something solid. A lifetime together, and maybe that's the cruelest trick life plays. You think you know the person lying next to you. You think you've built your world on bedrock. But sometimes, that bedrock is sand. And you don't find out until the tide comes in and sweeps it all away. I didn't know it then. But the foundation of my life was already cracking. The illusion of a perfect marriage was about to shatter. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Sunshine. I used to believe marriage was like a well-built house. You lay the foundation, raise the walls, patch the roof when it leaks, and if you take care of it, it lasts a lifetime. But what I learned too late is this. Sometimes termites are chewing through the beams, and you don't see the damage until the whole thing starts to crumble. For years, I told myself Linda and I were solid. We had raised 2 kids, paid off the mortgage, made it through sickness and hard times. I thought we were unshakable. But looking back now, the signs were there. Subtle at first, then louder, until they were screaming in my face. It started small. Linda began spending more time outside the house. Book club meetings, she said. Volunteering at the community center. Lunch with old friends. I never questioned it. Why would I? She'd always been social, always enjoyed staying busy. But I noticed that when I asked who she was meeting, she'd hesitate for a fraction of a second before answering. That hesitation, it should have told me something. But I brushed it off as nothing. Then there were the phone calls. She'd step outside onto the porch when her cell phone rang, her voice low, words too soft for me to catch. I'd ask who it was, and she'd smile, saying, "Just Sarah checking in," or, "Oh, it's Karen from the library." And I believed her. I remember one night in particular. I had fallen asleep on the couch watching a ball game, and when I woke up, it was nearly midnight. The house was quiet, except for the faint sound of Linda's voice in the kitchen. I got up, walked softly, and there she was, sitting at the table, phone pressed to her ear, whispering. When she noticed me, she jumped slightly, smiled quickly, and said into the phone, "I'll call you back." She ended the call, slipped the phone into her pocket, and came over to me, giving me a kiss on the cheek. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "I was just talking to Sarah." I wanted to believe her. God help me, I did believe her. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Then came the excuses. There were weekends when she said she was going to visit a friend in another town, sometimes staying overnight. She'd come back with little souvenirs, like a candle or book, and stories about what they did. I never questioned it, because why would I? After all those years, after raising children together, after standing side by side through everything, the thought of her lying to me seemed impossible. But something was changing between us. I could feel it, though I couldn't name it. She was more distant. Sometimes, when I'd reach for her hand, she'd pull away, pretending she needed to grab something else. In bed, she turned to her side more often, saying she was tired. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd smile faintly and say, "Of course." Why wouldn't it be? It was like living with a ghost of the woman I once knew. I remember the first real crack in the facade. It was our wedding anniversary, 40 years. I had planned a small dinner at home, just the two of us. I bought her favorite wine, cooked steak on the grill, even set the table with candles. She seemed distracted the whole evening. Her phone buzzed twice during dinner, and each time she glanced at it quickly before turning it face down. When I asked if something was wrong, she shook her head, forcing a smile. But I could see it in her eyes. Her thoughts were somewhere else. Later that night, when she went to bed, I picked up her phone from the counter. I wasn't the type to snoop. In fact, I had never once checked her messages or calls in all our years together. But something inside me, some instinct I couldn't silence, told me to look. There was nothing. The call log had been cleared. No texts, as if the phone was brand new. I set it down quickly, ashamed of myself. "What are you doing, Robert?" I thought. "This is your wife. You trust her." I crawled into bed beside her, but I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, wondering why my gut was twisting into knots. Weeks turned into months. The distance between us grew. We still went through the motions. Breakfast together, church on Sundays, visits with the kids. But something had shifted. One evening, we were watching television when a commercial came on, advertising a lakeside cabin resort. Linda's eyes lingered on the screen a little too long. She whispered almost to herself, "It's beautiful there." I asked if she'd like to go sometime, just the two of us. She looked at me, smiled faintly, and said, "Maybe." But in her voice, there was something bittersweet, almost like she was remembering, not imagining. The moment I should have known, the moment I should have seen everything clearly, came one autumn afternoon. I was cleaning the garage, sorting through boxes of old tools and camping gear. Linda had said she was going out shopping with a friend. Her purse was sitting on the workbench, and as I moved things around, it tipped over. A small envelope slid out. I bent down, picked it up. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges. A letter. It wasn't from me. The words were simple, but they cut through me like glass. "Can't stop thinking about last weekend at the cabin. You looked so beautiful, like you always do. I wish we didn't have to hide. Counting the days until I see you again, no signature. Just a single initial, M." My hands shook as I put the letter back, slipped it into her purse exactly as it was. My heart was pounding so loud, I thought it might break through my chest. I told myself I must have misread it, that maybe it was old, from a friend, a joke. Anything but what it clearly was. But deep down, I knew. The shadows were no longer just shadows. They were the truth, creeping into the sunlight, daring me to face them. And I wasn't ready. Not yet. Chapter 3. The Discovery. I told myself to forget the letter, to chalk it up to a misunderstanding, someone else's envelope that fell into Linda's purse by mistake, a clumsy joke, anything but what it was. I tried to bury it in the place where husbands keep their doubts, under layers of routine and errands and chores. But doubt is a stubborn weed. It finds light anywhere it can. For a few days, I watched her more closely. Not spying, at least that's what I told myself. Just noticing. She said she'd be at the library late for a board meeting. I checked the clock when she left, watched the porch light throw her shadow long across the walkway, and listened to the engine of her sedan fade into the distance. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I didn't want, staring at the silent phone, willing it to ring with a wrong number or a missed dial, something that would give me an excuse to stop thinking. Her texts came in shorter bursts than usual. Running late, don't wait up. Or meeting went long, back after 9. The words were harmless. It was the space around them that frightened me. The silences, the absences. On Saturday morning, I went to fetch the toolbox from the crawl space above the garage. The smell of dust and motor oil hit me as I slid the plywood cover aside and hauled the Rubbermaid bin down onto the workbench. A dozen old odds and ends were jumbled inside. Bent Allen wrenches, a stud finder that never worked, a bundle of dried-out paintbrushes, elastic together years ago. And at the bottom, tucked into the corner, there was a small tin. One of those Altoids mints containers Linda liked to save for paper clips and buttons. I popped the lid. Inside, wrapped with a thin blue ribbon, lay a key. Brass, short, with a stamped number on the head, 178. My first thought was locker key. My second thought was, I've never seen this before. Something else lay beneath the key. A folded receipt, brittle with age. I smoothed it flat. Maple River Cabins, an address upstate. A weekend in late September, 15 years ago. 2 nights, paid in cash. The name on the registration line was block printed in careful letters. Mark Hanley. I didn't know a Mark Hanley. I set the key and receipt back into the tin and stood there for a long time, listening to the tick of the cooling engine of my truck outside and the brush of oak branches against the eaves. I felt like I'd fallen through a trap door in my own life. Same house, same light, same air in my lungs, but standing in a room I didn't recognize. I put the tin back where I found it and closed the crawl space. My hands were steady. My legs were not. That afternoon, Linda hummed while she folded laundry in the den. She always hummed when she folded. She paired socks patiently, like a kindergarten teacher walking a line of children across a street. "What's that tune?" I asked, careful with my voice. "I don't know." She smiled without looking up. "Something from the radio." I sat on the edge of the couch and watched her hands. They were the same hands that had soothed fevered brows, packed school lunches, tightened my tie before funerals. Hands I knew better than my own. I tried to imagine those hands holding a pen to write, "Can't stop thinking about last weekend at the cabin." I failed. When she left for her book club on Tuesday, I opened the desk drawer where she kept her laptop. It wasn't locked. We'd never been that kind of couple. I stared at the login screen for a full minute, feeling like a thief in my own house, and then typed the password I'd seen her use 100 times. Sparrow 62. The desktop opened onto a photo of the 2 of us at Michael's wedding. Me in a rented tuxedo that never fit quite right. Linda in a navy blue dress that set off her eyes. We were laughing at something the photographer had said. It hurt to look at. I clicked through folders, photos, taxes, recipes. The last one was immense, dozens of subfolders. Cakes, pies, casseroles, holiday. At the very bottom was a folder labeled blueberries. I almost laughed at the coincidence. Linda used to make blueberry pancakes every other Sunday. I opened it. Inside were 3 files that had nothing to do with pancakes. 2 were scans, PDFs. One was a Word document titled August Packing List. I clicked the first PDF. A receipt bloomed on the screen. Maple River Cabins. Different dates this time. 6 years ago. The reservation line, M. Hanley. The companion line was blank. I clicked the second PDF. Another receipt. 4 years ago. Payment method, cash. The Word document was a tidy list in Linda's unmistakable voice. Pack the green sweater. Cool evenings by the water. Bring the good thermos. Don't forget the little flashlight. Trail is dark after 9. Buy batteries in town. Remember the blanket for stargazing. A line near the bottom stopped my breath. Park 2 miles down and walk in. Safer that way. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I printed the files. The printer chugged in the quiet of the study, spitting out the pages one by one like a machine counting out a sentence. When I closed the laptop, my own reflection stared back at me in the darkened screen. A man with gray at his temples, eyes rimmed red, mouth set in a line he didn't recognize. I felt old in a way I hadn't the day before. Thus, I took a drive. I didn't tell Linda. I didn't leave a note. I just got in the truck after breakfast on Thursday and pointed myself north, up past farms gone to seed in towns with a single stoplight, past the old state penitentiary that had been turned into a museum. The sky was the color of an old nickel, low and heavy. The radio murmured a country song about leaving and staying and the price you pay for both. Maple River Cabins sat off a county road behind a stand of pines, the kind that catch the wind and turn it into a hush. The sign was hand-painted, a green river curling through white letters. The gravel drive popped under my tires. A modest office cabin stood near the parking area, its porch lined with mismatched rocking chairs. A woman in her 70s sat behind the counter, a paperback open in front of her. She looked up when the bell on the door jingled. "Afternoon?" she said, setting the book aside. "You lost?" "I'm not sure." I tried to smile and failed. "I wondered if you had a cabin available for tonight." "Maybe 2, she shook her head. "Closed for the season starting next week. We've only got 1 rented this weekend," I nodded, as if I had expected that answer. I looked around the small room. A corkboard with local flyers, farmer's market, church potluck, an old map of the river with red thumbtacks marking fishing spots, a framed photograph of a couple standing by the water 40 years ago, hair blown wild, laughing. "Pretty place," I said. "Been here long?" "Since my husband and I bought it in '81. She smiled a little. "He's gone now, but the cabins keep me company." I cleared my throat. "Do you get a lot of regulars?" "Oh, sure," she said. "Fishing buddies. Anniversaries. Folks who want the quiet. We've got a pair that's been coming off and on for years. Never miss a September if they can help it." Something in my chest clicked. "A pair?" "Middle-aged," she said, absent-mindedly tapping a pencil against the countertop. "Well, older now. The woman's got kind eyes. Always brings me a jar of preserves. Blueberry, I think. The man's a polite one, keeps to himself." She squinted a little, thinking. "Hanley. I think that's the name he uses when he books. Mark Hanley. She signs the guest book with just an L. Not many couples do that anymore. Keep to initials." Like a secret code, my mouth had gone dry. "They here now?" "Not this weekend," she said. "But they were here in August. Couple nights. Would have stayed longer if the weather hadn't turned." I felt my knees loosen, like a ladder shifting under me. I put a hand on the counter to steady myself. Do you keep old guest books?" I asked. "My father used to sign those things wherever we went." "Just thought maybe I'd look for fun." She studied me a moment. "You all right, mister?" "I'm fine." The lie felt like chewing glass. just sentimental. She turned, bent, and pulled out a stack of black-covered books from the shelf behind her. "You can look," she said, "but don't bend the pages. My daughter's trying to put them all on the computer someday." I flipped to the most recent book, hands suddenly clumsy. The lines in the entries slid past, names, months, short notes. "Wonderful stay, see you next year. Caught 2 trout by the bend." And then, near the middle of the page, neat and small, L and M. Under it. The stars were so bright, we thought the sky might fall in and carry us with it. The date was 6 years ago. I opened an older book, L and M again, brought the good thermos this time. Coffee tasted like heaven by the water. I turned back further, L and M. My stomach turned. Another entry, L and M, September 2009. Our tree still stands. Carved hearts don't lie. "Is there a tree?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Something carved." The woman smiled. "Cabin 3. Behind it, there's an old maple. Folks carve their initials like children. We don't like it, but I stopped pulling the bark off years ago. People need to leave evidence that they mattered, I suppose." She peered at me. "You sure you don't want a cabin?" I shook my head. "No, ma'am. I think I've already stayed longer than I should." I walked out to the cabins as if my feet weren't attached to me. Pine needles stitched the ground into a soft carpet. Cabin 3 had a small porch with a rail, a pair of rocking chairs, and a view of the river bending away like a road into the trees. Behind it stood the maple, broad, scarred. I touched the trunk as if it might burn, then followed the lattice of carved initials with my fingertips. J plus S, K, and R. And then, low and near a knot in the bark, nested deep in old scar tissue, L plus M inside a crooked heart. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for a wind to come up, for the leaves to whisper things I didn't want to hear, for the ache in my chest to find a rhythm. When I turned to go, I saw a bench near the river with a view upriver toward a rocky outcrop. Someone had left a thermos on the slat, a dented Stanley, the old kind. I picked it up on reflex and unscrewed the cup. It was empty. But the smell rose up. A ghost of coffee and something sweet. Blueberries. I set it down carefully and walked back to the truck. On the way home, the sunset chewed itself into the horizon. In the half-light, the world looked like an old photograph left on a dashboard too long. Bleached at the edges, the center gone soft. I turned off the radio because the songs had too many memories. In our driveway, Linda's car sat under the sodium glow of the street lamp. The porch light was on. I could see her moving through the living room, setting a book on the shelf, picking it up again, setting it back. I sat in the truck with the engine off, hands on the steering wheel, a man rehearsing for a role he didn't want. Inside, she turned at the sound of the door and smiled. "There you are," she said. I was starting to worry. "Where'd you get off to?" "Up north," I said. My voice was a stranger in my mouth. "Took a drive. Everything okay?" I could have asked right then. I could have said, "Who is Mark Hanley?" I could have taken the printed receipts from my jacket pocket and laid them on the coffee table like evidence in a trial. I could have asked her why the thermos by the river smelled like our kitchen on those long-ago Sundays. But I didn't. Not yet. Some part of me, the last loyal outpost of my old life, wanted one more night when we were us, even if it had already passed. One more half-hour of pretending, a gentle landing before the ground disappeared. "Everything's fine," I said. The lie made my jaw ache. Traffic was bad. She nodded slowly, studying my face the way a nurse studies a chart. "You look tired." "I am," I said. "Think I'll turn in." She touched my arm as I passed her. It felt like being touched by someone through a window, warm but far away. After she fell asleep, I went to the den and pulled down the old photo albums. I hadn't opened them in years. Our memories had migrated to phones and hard drives. The leather cracked under my fingers. I flipped through birthdays and Easters, vacations and graduations. Linda's hair-changing styles, the kids shooting up like saplings, my own face softening around the eyes. Time does its work, and so do we. Somewhere around 2008, a church fundraiser. Linda was on the community center committee that year, in charge of donations and volunteers. There she was in a group photo, third from the left, holding a raffle basket, smile bright. Beside her, a man I didn't recognize. Tall, lean, gray at the temples, a polite tilt to his mouth like he wasn't sure he belonged in a photograph. The caption under the newspaper clipping taped into the album: Community Center Donor Recognition, March 2008. The names were listed in tiny type. I ran my finger down the column. Mark Hanley. He was there again in another photo from the same event, this time slightly behind Linda, as if he drifted into the frame by accident. I stared until the paper grain wavered. I tried to place him. Had he shaken my hand? Had I thanked him for helping the center? Had we spoken about the weather while my wife stood between us carrying a basket of wine and cheese? I turned the page too hard, and the plastic sleeve tore. I closed the album and set it on the floor. The house was very quiet. The kind of quiet you get in the last minutes before a storm breaks its back on the roof. In the morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a retired cop I knew from church, Ed Bloom. We'd coached Little League together when Michael was 9. Ed was the kind of man who wore a windbreaker in all weathers and could tell you which neighbor was having an affair by the way their porch light was on at odd hours. It wasn't that he was nosy, he just noticed things. When he picked up, his voice was still thick with sleep. Bloom? Ed, it's Robert Miller. A pause. Rob? Everything okay? I need a favor, I said, swallowing. I need you to look up a name. Another pause. You in trouble? I don't know, I said. I think I'm about to be. He exhaled slowly. All right. Shoot. Mark Hanley. Early 60s, maybe. Donor to the Maple Ridge Community Center about 15 years ago. Might live in county. Might not. Okay, he said. Paper rustled on his end, the sound of a pen being clicked. What am I looking for exactly? I don't know, I said again, hating the helplessness in my voice. An address? A job? Anything? Give me an hour, he said. And Rob? Yeah. You sure you want to open this door? I closed my eyes. Behind them, the carved heart on the maple tree glowed like a brand. No, I said, but I think the door opened itself. He didn't laugh. I'll call you back. I hung up and sat very still, listening to the refrigerator hum and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. 15 minutes later, I stood and walked to the bedroom. Linda was brushing her hair, looking at herself in the mirror the way women do when they're deciding which face to show the world that day. Morning, she said. Coffee? In a minute. I leaned in the doorway. You ever hear of a place called Maple River Cabins? The brush paused mid-stroke. Barely. A breath's worth. Then it resumed. Can't say I have, she said to the mirror. Where's that? Upstate, I said. Pine trees, river. Nice in September, I hear. She set the brush down and turned. Are you okay? I don't know, I said. It was becoming my answer to everything. I'm thinking about taking a trip. Just a few days. That sounds good, she said too quickly. Clears the head. Yeah, I said. Clears the head. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Ed. Call when alone. I stepped into the hallway. Morning meetings today? Linda called, moving toward the closet. I'll be back before dinner. Sure, I said, and dialed Ed. He answered on the first ring. All right, he said. Your guy, Mark Hanley, used to own a small machine shop on the south side. Sold it 10 years ago. Divorced in 2006. Lives alone out near County Road 14. Donates to the community center every other year. Likes to fish. 2 traffic tickets, nothing else on the board. No criminal record. He's ordinary, Rob. Very ordinary, I repeated. Yeah. Thank you, I said, and ended the call. I stood there. The carpet soft under my bare feet, the world loud in its ordinariness, the soft whir of the bathroom fan, the clink of a hanger against the closet rod, Linda humming an old tune. Love stories don't always find villains. Sometimes they just find people who chose badly and kept choosing badly until the choice was all that was left. Linda came out in a gray sweater and jeans, the outfit she wore when she wanted to be invisible. You sure you're all right? She asked, touching my forearm. You're pale. I'm fine, I said. Drive safe. She kissed my cheek and left. The door closed. The house exhaled. I went back to the study and opened the laptop again. There was one folder I hadn't noticed before, nested deep inside recipes greater than holiday, greater than sides. It was named River. Inside were 2 files. One was a photograph, grainy, low light, the kind you take when you don't want to use a flash. 2 coffee mugs on a picnic table, a lantern throwing a little circle of gold on the wood, beyond it the smear of the river in night. No people in the frame, but on the bottom edge, a shadow, the corner of a sleeve, a woman's hand. The other file was a letter in a Word document, dated 3 years ago, mid-September. It began without greeting and ended without a signature, but the voice was unmistakable. We agreed. No more writing things down. But I'm writing this anyway because I need to put it somewhere. I'm trying to do the right thing by everyone, and I keep failing. You said love is a place we go, not a promise we make. Maybe that's true. But I made promises too. I don't know how to live without breaking one or the other. I want the river. I want the porch light at home. I'm not strong enough to choose. Forgive me for that. Forgive me for all of it. I printed the letter and sat very still while the machine worked. The pages slid out warm into my hands. I read it twice. The first time it was fire. The second time it was ash. And that was when the grief came. Clean and blinding, a wave that bent me where I sat. I pressed my fists against my eyes until the light behind my lids exploded into color. I thought of the man at the fundraiser, careful not to touch my wife in the photographs. I thought of the carved heart in the bark and of the blueberry thermos and of Linda humming while she folded laundry. I thought of Michael, 9 years old on a pitcher's mound, and of Sarah asleep on Linda's shoulder in the pew. 40 years is a long time to be wrong about anything. When the crying was over, I stood, gathered the papers, and put them in a manila envelope. I set it on the coffee table where there would be no missing it. The house was suddenly too small. I walked to the porch and sat on the step, elbows on my knees, the cool air holding me up. A robin hopped in the yard, cocked its head, and flew. I stayed there until I heard the soft sound of Linda's car in the driveway. The door opened. She stepped onto the porch, saw me, and hesitated. "Did you eat?" she asked. "No," I said. "We need to talk." Her eyes moved, quick as a swallow. past my face and through the front window toward the envelope on the coffee table. A small sound left her throat, something like a word and a prayer colliding. "How much do you know?" she asked. "Enough," I said. She nodded, jaw trembling once, then steady. "Then I should tell you the rest." I stood. "Inside," I said, and held the door for her. She passed me carrying 30 years of secrets in the set of her shoulders. The discovery was no longer a possibility or a suspicion or a shadow in the sunshine. It had a shape now. It had a name. And it was sitting in my living room. I closed the door behind us, and the house, that old house we had built with patience and paint and paychecks, held its breath. Chapter 4. Confrontation. The hardest step I ever took in my life wasn't down an aisle or into a hospital room or out of a church after burying a parent. It was across my own living room floor, toward the woman I'd loved for 40 years, with an envelope of her secrets waiting on the table between us. Linda sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. She looked small, like a girl caught with stolen candy, except there was nothing innocent about what hung in the air. She didn't reach for the envelope. She didn't touch it at all. I sat down across from her, the coffee table a battlefield between us. My voice was calm, though my chest was a storm. "Tell me," I said. Her eyes flicked to the envelope and back to me. "How much have you read?" "All of it." My throat burned. The receipts, the letters, the guest book entries, the folder on your laptop. Enough to know I've been living with a stranger. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were wet. "I never wanted you to know this way." "That's rich," I snapped, surprising myself with the bite in my voice. "You never wanted me to know at all." She flinched, but didn't argue. Instead, she leaned forward, elbows on her knees, twisting her wedding band around her finger. "It wasn't supposed to go on this long." "How long?" My fists clenched in my lap. "Tell me." Her lips trembled, but the words came. "Since the early 90s, off and on, 25 years, maybe more." The number hit me like a hammer. 25 years. My son had been in middle school. My daughter still played with dolls. While I was coaching baseball and fixing bikes, she was carving initials into trees with another man. I felt sick. "Why?" She shook her head. "I don't know how to answer that." "I loved you, Robert. I still do. But Her voice cracked. "I loved him too." The words were a knife. Simple, sharp, no hesitation. I leaned back, staring at her like she was speaking a foreign language. "Loved him? You still talk like it's normal, like it's just another chapter and some book tears slipped down her cheeks." "It wasn't about replacing you. It wasn't about throwing away our life. Mark, he understood parts of me I didn't even know were there. We never planned to. But once it started, I couldn't let it go." "You couldn't let it go." My voice rose. "You could let go of honesty, of vows, of the truth. But not him?" Her shoulders shook. "I tried. God knows I tried. There were years when I stayed away from him. But then we'd cross paths at the community center, or he'd call, and it was like gravity. I couldn't fight it. I stood, pacing, running my hands through my hair. All those excuses. The book clubs, the overnights, the calls at midnight. I thought you were... My voice broke. "I thought you were mine." "You had me," she whispered. "I swear you did. Just not all of me." The room spun. I braced myself against the mantel, staring at the framed family photos lined up like silent witnesses. Michael in his cap and gown, Sarah holding her newborn, Linda and me on our 30th anniversary, smiling, wine glasses raised, lies captured in snapshots. I turned. Did the kids know? Her eyes widened. No. God, no, they can never. They'll know. I cut her off. Maybe not the details, but they'll know we're not what we pretended to be. That their mother betrayed their father for half their lives. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed, shoulders shaking violently. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could keep both worlds. I slammed my hand against the mantel. You thought wrong. The sound echoed through the house, startling us both. I'd never raised a hand to her, never even shouted like that. But rage made me someone else. I dropped into the armchair, suddenly exhausted. Do you love him more than me? Silence. The longest silence I've ever endured. Finally, she whispered. It was never about more or less. It was different. He was freedom. You were home? I laughed bitterly. Freedom? Sneaking around like teenagers, hiding names in guest books. That's your freedom? She looked at me, eyes swollen, face red. It felt alive. Do you understand? With you, everything was steady, safe, predictable. With him, it was like the world could break open and swallow us, and somehow that danger made me feel. She trailed off, ashamed. Made you feel what? I pushed. Like I wasn't just a wife, or a mother, or the woman making pancakes every Sunday. Like I was me. Still me, I stared at her. The woman I had shared my life with, the woman who had borne my children, was telling me she needed another man to feel like herself. I whispered. Then who the hell was I to you? Her sobs quieted. She wiped her eyes with trembling fingers. You were the man who gave me a family, a home, stability, love. Don't think for a second I didn't love you. Love me? I said coldly. You loved me enough to keep me in the dark while you shared yourself with him. Her voice cracked again. I was a coward. I couldn't choose, so I chose both. And I hate myself for it. I stood, walking to the window. Outside, the lawn glowed in the last light of day, the neighbor's dog barking at nothing. Life went on, ordinary, as if my world hadn't just ended. Finally, I said the words I never thought I'd say. I want a divorce. Her sobbing stopped. Slowly, she lifted her head. Robert, I can't live with this. I can't spend the years I have left wondering whose hand you're really thinking of when you hold mine. Wondering if every memory we made was just a cover for your secret life. She shook her head violently. Please, don't throw it all away. We've built so much. The kids, the grandkids. You threw it away, I said. Piece by piece. Every time you drove up to that cabin. Every time you answered his call. Every time you signed that guest book. The silence after that was final, heavy. Linda bent forward, covering her face again. For the first time in my life, I felt nothing toward her. No pity, no comfort, just emptiness. I walked to the study, pulled open the drawer, and found the manila envelope with the evidence. I tossed it onto the couch beside her. Keep it, I said, or burn it. Doesn't matter. I've seen enough. Her hands rested on the envelope as if it weighed 100 pounds. I went upstairs, packed a bag with clothes, my razor, a few essentials. I didn't know where I'd go. Maybe a motel, maybe Michael's place in Chicago. But I knew I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. Not ever again in the same way. As I walked down the stairs with the bag over my shoulder, Linda stood at the bottom, tears streaming, arms hanging limp. Robert, she whispered, please, don't leave like this. I stopped one step above her, looking down at the woman who had been my world. For 40 years, I thought she was my forever. Now she was just a stranger, who shared my last name. I already stayed too long, I said. Then I opened the door, stepped into the cool night air, and left. Chapter 5. The Collapse. I spent the first night at the Maplewood Inn out by the interstate, the kind of place where the carpet smells like someone tried to clean something that wouldn't come clean. The TV flickered B-roll of baseball highlights with the sound muted. The air conditioner rattled. I lay on top of the covers with my shoes still on and stared at the hairline crack in the ceiling that ran from the sprinkler head to the smoke detector, like a map of a river I couldn't cross. At 2:30 in the morning, I opened the little pad of paper by the phone and started a letter to my kids. Michael, Sarah, your mother and I are separating. I got as far as separating and crossed it out. Divorcing. I stared at the word until the letters lost their meaning. I tore the page out, folded it until it was a hard square, and dropped it in the trash. At dawn, I went to a diner with a neon sign that said, "Eats," because that's what diners are brave enough to promise. The waitress called me Han without looking up from her order pad. Coffee tasted like a memory from a fishing trip 30 years ago, burned, strong, honest. An old-timer in a seed corn hat sat 2 stools down and stirred his oatmeal like it had wronged him. "You from around here?" he said without turning his head. "Sort of," I said. "North Side." He nodded like he knew every North Side in America. "You look like a man who just told the truth or just heard it. Either one will take a few years off you." I let out something between a laugh and a cough. Maybe both. He tipped his spoon in the air as if toasting a stranger's private war. "Truth's blunt," he said, "but it's a cleaner cut." I paid in cash and sat in the truck until the sun pushed itself through the low clouds. Then I dialed my son. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Dad. Everything all right? You never call this early. Got a minute?" I said. "Yeah," he said, voice going careful. "What's going on?" I could have lied, said I was calling about the ball game or the brakes on the truck. Instead, I took the Band-Aid off like the old-timer said. Cleaner cut. "Your mother and I are divorcing." Silence. I pictured him in his kitchen in Chicago, one hand on the phone, the other on the back of a chair, the way he steadies himself when he hears bad news. I could hear a city bus sighing outside his window. "What happened?" he asked finally. "We'll talk about details later," I said. "Just, she wasn't faithful." For a long time, his breath came out in a short, hard burst. "You serious?" I wish I wasn't. "Do you need me to come home?" "No." I felt something unclench in me at the word home. "I'll be okay. I'm filing papers today." He was quiet a moment. "I'm sorry, Dad. I don't know what to say." "Say you're okay," I said. "Say you'll look out for your sister." "She's going to be crushed," he said. "She idolizes Mom." "I know. I'll call her," he said. "Or do you want to?" "I'll call Sarah," I said. "She should hear it from me." We hung up. I waited another minute like a man standing at the edge of a cold lake, then called my daughter. She answered with a laugh in her voice. "Dad, I was just about to text you a picture of Lily's science project." "Oh, are you okay?" "I need to tell you something," I said. "Your mother and I are divorcing." The laugh left her voice like someone turned off a radio mid-song. "What? Number? Why would you? Did something happen? Is this because of your blood pressure? Is someone sick?" "Nothing like that," I said, and then wished I'd said everything like that. "Your mother, she hasn't been faithful. It's been going on a long time." I heard her set the phone down softly, then pick it up again. "Mom wouldn't do that," she said. "Dad, she's Mom." I'm not asking you to take sides, I said. I'm asking you to believe me. She started to cry, not the loud kind, the little breaths gone wrong kind. Can we talk? All of us, tonight? Yes, I said. Come by the house at 7. Your brother will be on video. Okay, she whispered. Dad, are you angry with me? Did I miss something? Was I supposed to? You didn't miss anything, I said. I did. I found a lawyer in a brick building behind the courthouse, a woman named Elena Alvarez, who had photos of a little boy with a missing front tooth tacked to her bulletin board and a stack of color-coded folders on her desk. She shook my hand like she meant it and handed me a glass of water. How long were you married? She asked, clicking a pen open. 42 years, I said. She nodded. All right. I'm sorry to meet you under these circumstances, Mr. Miller, but I'll be straight with you. In this state, marital misconduct doesn't change much about property division. We'll do an equitable split. Spousal support is likely given the length of the marriage and your earning history. But we can negotiate terms. I'm not interested in punishing anyone, I said. The word surprised me coming out of my mouth. I'm interested in being done. That helps, she said. Do you want the house? I thought of the front porch at dusk and the way the floorboards creak in the hall outside the kids' rooms. I thought of the maple tree in the backyard with the tire swing long gone, but the branch still reaching. No, I said. I don't want that house anymore. She made a small note. Are you safe going back there to get your things? I'll be fine, I said. Then here's our plan, she said, sliding a packet across the desk. We file. We ask for a temporary arrangement while we negotiate the rest. If you two can keep it civil, this goes faster. Faster is cheaper. Faster is cleaner, I said, and she gave me a puzzled look. Never mind. On the way out, she stopped me at the door. Mr. Miller, get a notebook. Start writing down what you want to keep and what you can live without. Not just property, routines, boundaries. Divorce isn't just subtraction, it's choosing the shape of what's left, choosing the shape of what's left. I wrote that down. At 7, Sarah came with a Tupperware of lasagna she set on the counter and forgot. She hugged me too tight and then stepped back like she'd overstepped a boundary neither of us knew was there. I opened my laptop on the coffee table and propped it up on a stack of magazines. Michael's face bloomed in a little rectangle. Pale, jaw tight, the city moving behind him in a window like an aquarium. Linda sat on the end of the couch. Small, steady, eyes red. She'd put on a blue sweater I bought her for our 30th anniversary. I remembered the way she'd twirled in the store mirror back then and asked, "Is it too much?" I had said, "You could never be too much for me." I couldn't remember the last time that was true. I don't want to make this harder than it already is, I said. So I'm going to be plain. Your mother and I are divorcing. I'm filing this week. It's not a fight about money, it's about trust. And that trust is gone. Sarah looked from me to Linda like she was watching a tennis match no one wanted to win. "Mom?" she said, voice small. Linda folded her hands in her lap. "It's true," she said. "I betrayed your father. I betrayed all of you. I am sorry in a way I don't have words for." Sarah shook her head. "How long?" Linda took a breath and let it go. "A long time." Michael's voice came through tinny and controlled. "Do we need to know the details?" "No," I said quickly. "You don't." Sarah dissolved again. "We can fix this," she said, almost to herself. "People fix things. You go to counseling. You..." "No," I said, gentler than I felt. Some things you don't fix. You end them before they rot the rest of your life. Michael's eyes softened. What do you need from us? I need you both to keep loving your mother, I said. Linda's head snapped up. She failed me. She didn't fail you. Don't make my wound into your war. Sarah wiped her face with her sleeve. I feel like somebody took our family photo and cut it down the middle. I nodded. Me too. We sat there with the sound of the refrigerator humming and a clock I'd stopped hearing 20 years ago suddenly loud again. Michael broke the silence. Dad, I can fly in next weekend. Help you move if you need it. I'll let you know, I said. I'm going to get an apartment for a while. Figure out what the shape of left looks like. Linda reached for Sarah's hand, but Sarah didn't see it, or pretended she didn't. When the call ended and Sarah left the lasagna on the counter anyway, I stood in the kitchen with Linda. The house felt like it had been emptied of all the air it used to carry. I'll tell them the rest, Linda said. They don't need to hear anything from you that hurts you to say. They don't need the rest, I said. They need time. She nodded. After a long moment, she said, I can sign whatever you want. The house, the accounts. I don't care, Her voice trailed. I'm not going to that cabin anymore. Good, I said. I meant none of the things good usually means. I rented a one-bedroom over a barber shop on Maple Avenue. The landlord was a widow who looked at me the way nurses look at men who forget their own birthdays. Kind, but not fooled. The apartment came with a couch that had seen too many lives and a kitchenette with 2 burners that lied about being able to boil water. I bought a coffee maker and a set of plates that came in a box with a picture of a couple smiling at a salad. I used the bottom plate for change and keys. First nights in new places have a sound. They hum at a frequency your bones don't know yet. A train passed a few blocks away at 10:30, and I could feel the vibration in the floorboards before I could hear the horn. Someone upstairs walked like they were trying not to wake a child. I made a list like the lawyer told me. What I keep? My grandfather's watch, the letter opener Sarah made me from a bent nail in 4th grade, the photo of Michael in a Tiger's uniform missing 2 front teeth, the box of postcards Linda collected from flea markets. No, not those. Not yet. What I can live without? The oak table with the burn mark from the summer we tried to can peaches, the wedding china we never used, the porch swing. New boundaries. Don't answer Linda's calls after 10. Don't check her email. Don't drive north. I lasted 9 days before I drove north. Not to the cabins. To the river near town. The one where we used to take the kids to throw breadcrumbs to ducks that had no interest in bread. The bench by the bend had a plaque with someone's name and the years that were kind to them and then weren't. I sat there and let the cold come up through the wood and into my back. I took off my ring and turned it in my hand. There was a little channel worn into the skin below it, an indentation the size of faith. Across the river, a boy threw a stick for a dog that didn't understand physics and barked at the splash like it was surprised. The dog swam hard after nothing. I closed my fingers around the ring, then put it back on. I wasn't ready to be that kind of alone yet. Church on Sunday was an ambush I set for myself. I walked in with my head up, hands in my pockets like I was at a hardware store, and felt 100 eyes do the math. The pastor, a man younger than my son with a smile that shouldn't have had to carry so much pain, shook my hand longer than usual. Good to see you, Robert, he said, and not, where's Linda? Which was a kindness. After the service, a couple from our old Bible study group came over with faces like casseroles left too long in a warm car. We heard, the the wife said, squeezing both my hands. We are praying. Thank you. I said. Her husband nodded solemnly. "These things happen," he said, and then realized from my face he'd stepped on something sharp. I mean, God knows. God knows, I said, and left before the coffee hour. In the parking lot, a man leaned against a pickup with a VFW sticker in the window. "You Robert?" he called. "Yes. I'm Stan." Thursday mornings, there's a group of us. We drink bad coffee and say things our wives don't want to hear. Some of us don't have wives anymore. "Come by. I'll think about it," I said. "Don't think too hard," he said. "Thinking gets loud." On Thursday, I went. We sat around a folding table that had held more potlucks than confessions and told the truth in small, manageable pieces. Stan had lost his wife to a Texas nurse with a tattoo of a sparrow on her wrist. Mel had driven his RV to Arizona to outrun a marriage that died in Nebraska and learned an RV can only go as fast as your grief will let it. Ray drank too much until he didn't. They listened without trying to fix me. When I told them about the carved heart on the maple, they nodded like they all had trees somewhere with their names in the bark. "Do you want to hit the guy?" Stan asked, not unkindly. "I want to not want to," I said. "Good enough for today," he said. Papers slid back and forth across tables the next month, ink drying into decisions. The house went to Linda because she wanted the porch light, and I didn't. The retirement accounts divided like a pie cut by a hand that didn't care whose slice had the crust. The lawyers said we were efficient, almost polite. I signed where Elena pointed and tried not to look at the date as if it were looking back at me. We met once, just the two of us, in the empty kitchen. The walls had rectangles of clean paint where pictures had hung, ghosts of frames. Linda stood on the opposite side of the island and wrapped her hands around a mug she wasn't drinking from. "I told him," she said finally, without saying his name. "It's over." "Good," I said. I wanted to ask if it hurt her the way it hurt me. I didn't. "I keep thinking," she said, mouth trembling, "about the morning Michael lost his first tooth and you pretended to faint. He laughed so hard he forgot to be scared. That's who you are, Robert. I'm sorry I forgot. It's not that I wasn't funny anymore," I said. "It's that you wanted a world where I wasn't the punchline." She closed her eyes. "You're not a punchline." "I am in his story," I said, and we both flinched. We divided the last drawer. Rubber bands, that weird corkscrew no one knows how to use. A handful of screws that don't match anything anymore. It felt right that we ended with a drawer that was mostly junk and a couple of small things you don't know you need until you do. At the door, she said, "I'm going to tell the kids the truth. Not everything, but enough that they don't make up worse. Tell them you loved me," I said, and hated that I needed to hear her say it. "I loved you," she said. She stopped herself. "I loved you." I nodded. "Goodbye, Linda." She reached out like she might touch my arm, then thought better of it. "Goodbye, Robert." I walked to the truck with the last box, a stack of old tax returns, my father's pocket knife, the letter opener shaped like a nail. The door closed behind me with the soft finality of a book shut after the last page. Divorce decrees don't sound like anything. They sit in a manila folder on a date that isn't special until it becomes the day you start measuring from. Elena slid it across the desk and said, "You're free to go." "Free," I repeated. The word felt big enough to trip over. "Take care of yourself," she said. "The first holidays are the hardest. Make a plan. Even if it's a bad plan, make one." I walked out into a bright afternoon that had the nerve to be beautiful. The courthouse steps were warm under my hand, the railing nicked by 1,000 palms, finding balance. A couple in their 20s laughed at nothing on the sidewalk. I wanted to tell them, don't let the map fool you. Some bridges aren't there anymore. Instead, I put on my sunglasses and kept walking. That night, in the apartment over the barber shop, I made grilled cheese on a pan that hated me and ate it standing up. I put my ring in the little dish with my keys and change and watched the circle it left in my skin fade a fraction. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a jelly jar and held it up to the window like a man toasting no one in particular. My phone buzzed. A message from Michael. Thinking of you. Call if you want to talk. Another from Sarah. A photo of my granddaughter holding up a construction paper heart with glitter on it. Grandpa, I love you this big. Underneath, Sarah had typed, we'll figure out new traditions. New traditions. I wrote it on the same page as choosing the shape of what's left. I slept that night with the window cracked, the train passing at 10:30 like a metronome reminding me I was still here. Time still moving forward, even if I wasn't keeping up. Around 4, I woke to rain hitting the sill and the faint sound of someone upstairs walking carefully. Maybe he was trying not to wake a child. Maybe he was the child, grown into a man with careful feet. I closed my eyes and pictured a river, not the one with a heart carved into a tree by a cabin, not the one in town where the dog chased physics, but a river I hadn't seen yet. In the morning, I wrote Chapter 6, Life After Truth at the top of a clean page. Not because I felt ready, because pages don't fill themselves. Chapter 6, Life After Truth. Freedom isn't the roar of a crowd or the open road under your tires. Freedom, I've learned, is the quiet of an empty room where no one is lying to you anymore. It's smaller than I imagined and heavier too. The weeks after the divorce blurred together. Paperwork stacked in neat piles on my counter. Calls from the kids that started with long silences and ended with, "Love you, Dad." Nights when I sat with the television on mute just to have company. Mornings when I caught myself reaching across the bed to a place that wasn't warm anymore. I thought grief ended when someone died. Turns out, grief has cousins. One visits when the person you loved is gone from this earth. The other moves in when they're still alive, still making coffee, still humming in another house, but not yours. I carried both. I filled my days with small tasks, fixing the leaky faucet in the apartment, sorting through boxes I hadn't opened in years, writing lists I never finished. On Thursdays, I went back to the group at the church basement. Stan with his seed corn hat, Mel with his Arizona stories, Ray with his hands that shook until they didn't. We sat with our styrofoam cups of weak coffee and told the truth in doses we could swallow. One morning, I said, she told me I was home, that he was freedom. I keep wondering which one matters more. Stan shrugged. Depends where you're standing. A man in a storm wants home. A man in a cage wants freedom. Problem is, storms and cages look a lot alike when you're inside them. Ray said, don't try to rank her lies. They're all lies. Just don't make them yours, I nodded. And for once, didn't argue. The holidays came. Thanksgiving at Sarah's, the kids laughing in the kitchen while she basted a turkey too big for her oven. Linda was there. She asked if I minded before coming. I said I didn't. It was a lie I could live with. We sat at opposite ends of the table. She passed me the gravy boat without our fingers touching. For the first time in years, I tasted food without wondering what it cost. After dinner, Sarah's little girl climbed into my lap with sticky hands and said, "Grandpa, you smile funny." I laughed, and it felt real. Christmas, Michael flew in. We rented a cabin, not that cabin, another one, different river, different town. We built a fire that smoked too much and played cards until midnight. No traditions yet, just placeholders. but placeholders can grow roots if you water them. That night, Michael asked, "Do you ever think about dating again?" I shook my head. Dating is for men who still believe in the sales pitch. He smiled sadly. "You don't have to buy the whole pitch, Dad. Just maybe rent an evening now," and then I didn't answer. But the thought stayed with me. In spring, I drove past the old house. The porch light was on. The yard was mowed. Linda was out front, planting flowers the way she always did when the frost let go of the ground. She looked up, saw my truck, and raised a hand. Not a wave, just a hand. I lifted mine in return and kept driving. That was enough. What I know now is this: betrayal doesn't erase love, it rewrites it. My life with Linda wasn't all a lie. The pancakes, the camping trips, the nights we laughed until we cried, those were real. But so was the cabin, the carved tree, the late night calls. Both truths live in me. They always will. What matters is what I choose to carry forward. I choose my children's laughter. I choose Thursday mornings with men who understand broken things. I choose the smell of coffee in a kitchen that's mine alone. I choose a river I haven't found yet. I don't know if I'll fall in love again. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. What I do know is that I won't confuse comfort with blindness or loyalty with silence. They say the truth will set you free. I don't feel free yet, but I feel awake. And maybe that's the first step. So when people talk about growing old with their one true love, I smile and nod. But inside, I know something else. Sometimes the person you grow old with isn't truly yours. Sometimes the greatest heartbreak isn't losing them to death. It's realizing you never had them fully in the first place. And sometimes, surviving that truth is the closest thing to freedom a man will ever know.